the real question is, well, there are many questions in terms of how do we do it properly? How do we do it in a controlled way? What measures and controls, and security is a big topic about that. AI without trust is worthless. So how do we do it in a trustworthy way? But that big, large question as a side, I think there is another one, which is what kind of society we want to design.
The AI Grapple, where the future begins.
What if AI could be both brilliant and deeply human? My name is Kate vanderVoort, and I am founder and CEO of Social Mediology and the AI Success Lab. Today's guest on the AI Grapple podcast is Alberto Chierici, an AI pioneer, author of The Ethics of AI, and a leader at the Gradient Institute, where he focuses on creating responsible, human-centered technology. From startups to advising global organizations, Alberto has dedicated his career to ensuring that AI serves humanity. In this episode, we discuss practical strategies for ethical AI, balancing human connection with innovation and the promise and challenges of the next wave of autonomous AI systems. Tune in for a thought-provoking conversation on shaping AI to truly align with human values. Hi, Alberto. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for inviting me.
It's so great to have you here. So, you've had a really interesting journey from being an AI founder to being a real thought leader and author around AI and ethics. So I'm so excited to have this conversation. But I wonder if you can just start with what sparked your passion for ensuring that AI really serves humanity rather than being just another technological advancement.
Thank you, Kate. That's a wonderful and big question. The journey started working in insurance, actually. My early career was working as an actuary in insurance, and that's a mysterious word. Many people don't know what an actuary is and does. But it's very similar to modern, let's say, data scientists. Actuaries are statisticians who build models for predicting future outcomes in an insurance context. And I was developing a lot of these statistical models that, back in the days was very similar to what we do today with machine learning. But I was building these models to take very, let's say, high-stake decisions like what is the price for a certain insurance plan, and deciding a statistical quantity versus another. So let's say I analyze the population and I find out that there is this risk of accident for half of the population or 70% of the population. Where you set that sort of KPI, 70%, 50%, becomes associated decisions, because that goes to feed a price. And once you set the price of a product, you're going to have a part of the population that can afford it, another part that cannot afford it. So that sort of hit me because, we were trained on doing a lot of technical, cool stuff, fancy models, but we never had the conversation in terms of what is the impact. Like we optimize risk, we optimize profit, we optimize cost. Why aren't we asked to optimize anything like fairness or distribution of outcomes and so on? So that really, it's when it hit me where I had my wake-up call that changed everything. And after those early years, I became a machine learning engineer and started building machine learning systems for financial institutions, and eventually entered into entrepreneurship. And my first startup was building a chatbot framework with low-code tools for enterprise insurance clients to automate certain customer journeys. And again, there I had this sort of trade-off, like should I use the fancy model, like the latest AI discovery to do something, or there is something else that we need to consider. And from these ethical considerations, I started thinking more and more about it. And then it went like over a big rabbit hole. I took a PhD later in life, and I took classes on responsible AI, responsible data science. I started working with a group of professionals who cared about the same topics. We prepared a public exhibition in New York to speak about these issues, and eventually all of this, let's say, naturally imbued my book.
I always find it interesting speaking to people who've been in AI for a while, because you must scratch your head a little bit about the chat GPT moment that everybody else has had. If you've been in this space for a while, what kind of time frame are we talking about that you've been working on AI?
Quite a long time frame. So I would say I had my ChatGPT moment around 2013 or 14. I was building some traditional machine learning models and systems, and I attended a conference in London organized by a guy working in venture capital. He's a very, very, very famous person nowadays. He's Nathan Benaich is the author of an AI report that it's incredibly well structured, thought out, and written every month and year. And but back then, like AI was just a few gigs, a few meetups here and there. In London, there were a couple of them, and at these meetups, there was Mustafa Suleyman at the day that he wasn't a nobody, and he was around pitching this startup that was building like an AI tool to help fashion industry or retailers to check and try clothes over a picture. That little startup eventually became DeepMind, and today everybody knows the name DeepMind. And at that conference, I heard Mustafa, I heard other engineers working on these tools, and I was really fascinated. I was really impressed by how many things we wished computers were able to do and that back then couldn't. And there was a very viable way and route to build all these wonderful things. So that's what shifted my career focus entirely into AI. I took the AI course that everybody loves, Andrew NG, like Introduction to Machine Learning. That it was, I think, the very first Coursera class in 2013 or 14. I can't remember. And that was, the set of the whole journey.
Yeah, amazing. I'm very much a front-end generative AI user, so I'm always very inspired by those that understand how it works under the hood. So, wow, tell us a bit about your business and what your company's doing now and what you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So my journey took a lot of bumps and twists and pivots. I initially worked in traditional machine learning in consulting, then founded my company. There was a chatbot builder, as I mentioned earlier. And at some point, I had to step back from my company because my wife found a job abroad. We moved country, and it was 2018, but remote work was not such a thing back then, especially in Europe. European insurance clients, enterprises, they were really not used to any Zoom-in meetings, etc. So I took a step back from my startup. It's still running today with the other two founders. I no longer have an active role there. And I started doing a number of things. I freelanced for different projects. I tried to start another couple of businesses, and unfortunately, they had a very short life because of COVID. And between 2020 and 2022, I worked remotely for Tesla to launch an internal venture called Tesla Insurance. It was the early days of Tesla entering into the insurance space. And I wrote a book about AI in 2020, published in 2021, and helped a number of entrepreneurs and larger companies to set up their first data science team, their first machine learning product. And until I moved to Australia a few months ago. And when I arrived in Sydney, I was looking for roles that could combine these two passions of mine, like AI development, but also the ethical and responsible side. which landed me to collaborate with the Gradient Institute, which is a non-for-profit independent research institute. We do research on responsible AI, and we advise government and large companies on AI governance, how to apply AI responsibly. And we are lately entering into the wider, let's say, umbrella term called AI safety, which is like a number of research directions to make sure these models are trustworthy.
Yeah, amazing. So a lot of the companies and businesses that I work for or work with are very early in their journey. And I think in Australia, we're still a little bit behind the rest of the world in terms of AI adoption and the integration and implementation of AI. And a lot of what we focus on is that culture change that needs to happen in order for companies to start embracing this technology. So in your book, The Ethics of AI, what kind of things do you explore, or what are some of those tangible things that businesses can do to ensure that they're balancing technological innovation, wanting to jump onto the AI train, if you like, whilst also doing that in a really responsible and ethical way?
A great question. I would say there are probably two parts of these questions that I want to address. So the first one is, let's speak about first transitioning into AI, or what does it mean to have a business adopting AI or adapting to this new world. I would say that the roadmap that 90% of leaders miss is that it's really not about how to transition to AI or how to use AI. It's more about your why. So first of all, why does your business exist? What is the core value or the core value proposition for a business to deliver? And how do we pursue that objective and deliver our key services? I think that's the very first question in front of every transformation. So I witnessed a lot of companies and incumbents back in 2010 when the imperative was, let's transform to mobile first. It was on top of the agenda of many digital transformation programs. And when I built my first startups, a lot of the motivations to adopt our technology was also part of the mobile first transformation. And I kind of see a parallel in history. Today is really an AI first transformation. And it's about really how, let's say, how people operate. Back then it was everyone was just operating on mobile, businesses or customers, general public, etc. Today, the transformation to AI is thinking about a new way of operating, both for a company, how they work, and for a customer, how do they access to services and interface with services and technology. So coming back to the roadmap, so first start with why, like why does your business exist? And I make the example of insurance because it's an industry I work with a lot. Insurance exists to make people safer and to manage risk. Manage risks means also entering or developing innovation in certain fields without being too worried about when something goes wrong. Do they have enough financial safety net? And often, if the reason of existence clashes with other objectives, it's where things go wrong. For example, insurance is famous for claim departments really doing their best not to play claims, but the insurance service is really the moment of truth of an insurance product is when the claim must be paid. And that clashes often with the objective of certain claim departments, which is cut costs, pay less as possible, etc. And the same is true in other ways. Today with AI, a lot of companies are rethinking customer service. So the objective is really, how can I deliver the best possible experience to my customers? It shouldn't be how do I cut costs. We've seen in Australia, we have problems with Woolworth these days, employees striking because an algorithm is like an algorithm called the framework, quote unquote, is responsible of their every single move and decisions at work. And we've seen this in many other places like the Amazon warehouses or Deliveroo drivers in Europe. There are many of these companies that handle the workforce by strict algorithm rulemaking. And what that leads to is people trying to cut corners and to respond to the algorithm, so decreasing safety behaviors, and that hits back on employees' safety, work incidents. So it's really a bad outcome because the whole focus is cutting costs. Whereas again, starting with why does the service and business exist, and the next step is how do we deliver that service, that product, and finally comes the what. And when we come to the what, it's the point where I usually advise to see whether AI makes sense or not, because some problems may be better solved with AI, others may not. So that's the sort of journey that I think 90% of leaders miss. I'm sorry if I go long on this question, but there is the second part of the question, which is more like how to do it the proper way, like what is the ethical way to go over this journey.
Just before we get to that part, so I think there's a couple of really interesting things in what I'm hearing you saying. And one I'd love to explore a little bit more, because it's something that plays in my mind a lot, is this concept of AI making decisions that are really, really impact the consumer or the customer. Where have you seen, so I'm diverting just a little bit before we get to the tactical or the strategy of how you combat that, but where have you seen that go well, and maybe where have you seen that not go so well? Because it's one of the things I'm very aware of, is that if we have AI making decisions that have a very real, sometimes life and death experience, outcome for people, I guess just talk about where do you see that go right, and where can that go wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me think. It's very easy to think about when it doesn't go right, but I want to start from the positive note. I think, there is a use case I came across quite recently where it goes right. There are certain jobs that put human lives at risk, like when I don't know, when there is a huge tall building and somebody has to check like a part on the top of the building, and usually they send the person with, it's a very high risk situation, wind blows really strongly over there, and it's usually one of those areas where people really risk lives. And there are companies developing drones and other tools to actually do that job. And this is where AI decision making often gets, let's say, is much less probably biased or problematic than humans, because again, if you think about a human person hanging on just a few cords around the top of a building, and with a lot of preoccupation about doing the right thing, safety measures, etc., taking a measurement or taking pictures of a piece of equipment that needs to be checked and tested is very prone to error. Whereas a drone that can fly, take pictures, AI that analyze all of that probably does that much better without risking the lives of anyone. That's a typical case where AI decision making, there is a strong case for adopting algorithmic decision making. Whereas, wrong examples, there are many. One that I'm particularly passionate about is algorithms used for scanning resumes or CVs. In recruiting, if we think about the whole pipeline of recruiting, screening candidates, interviewing, extending an offer, the sad reality is that at each one of these steps, there is a, let's say, exaggerate use of algorithms. Scanning CVs, it's becoming completely automated, so just searching for keywords. And that perpetuates all sorts of biases. There is an old study from a few years ago at Amazon. These algorithms were obviously discriminating for women. Some algorithms were pushing up the acceptance list people who played lacrosse or whose name was Jared, so picking up some sort of demographic biases there. So it's really a place with an incredible amount of biases. Researchers in AI, in responsible AI, tried to fix these biases for a long time unsuccessfully. So it's one of those places where I'm very skeptical there is any solution. And as a matter of fact, in 2018 or 19, state of New York banned certain recruiting systems using automated decision making. And I think there are certain areas where we should really, like as a society, ban the use. That there's no clear path to use it well or responsibly.
Yeah, and I think that recruitment's a really interesting one, because I often talk about where social media is going. And if you've just got AI bots reading content that's created by AI, you've just got this ecosystem that is just AI. And why would humans even want to show up in that?
Yeah.
And the recruitment side surely is a bit similar. If you've just got people applying for jobs using AI and you've got AI deciding whether they're a good fit for the job or not, it's kind of this closed loop that it's like, well, where do the humans fit in that? So I think that's a really...
absolutely. And it's funny now there are candidates using ChatGPT to obviously beat the algorithm. And organizations now, they shout outraged that, candidates fake CVs, but, they're only fighting back with the same weapons you're using.
I hear a lot about people talking. I was speaking to a technology and transformation manager in a large corporate who was talking about fighting AI with AI in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot of this AI versus AI or AI with AI. And it's one of the biggest questions we need to be, answering and staying on top of is, well, where's the human role in that?
Yes.
Now, one of the things you were talking about was cutting costs. And I think it's something I've seen quite a bit of recently, where companies are making decisions to let go of human input within a business to cut costs, but then finding that there's not enough humans left to actually deliver the service or to deliver what it is that they're needing to deliver to the customer. So I'd love to hear some of your practical strategies, I guess, about how businesses can navigate this ethical and responsible. I know that's where you were heading before, but the ethical and responsible implementation or integration of AI. How do you suggest business leaders in particular approach that?
Yeah, definitely. So, just to continue the process that I was outlining, I started from more probably a very high level place. So start with your why and understanding how you want to change processes and ways of operating of your business and delivering a service or a product to the what you need to do. So that's probably the first part. And then very practically, there are, I think, 5 priorities to address in organizations in terms of moving to a world that is going to be AI first. And I actually posted on LinkedIn about this recently. I was just drawing a cheat sheet of what are the top 5 steps, and I really stand by it. So the first one is knowledge. So the first priority area is to train and upskill teams and staff on a number of fronts, like how to use AI, how to operate with AI, and let's say the benefits of doing that is you have people that, first of all, grateful, upskilled employees that are ready, to embrace this new world, or let's say to move to better roles. You can also, with training and knowledge, a business can decide what game they want to play, whether they want to develop AI internally, whether they just want to deploy a third-party tool or use it or combine any of these. problem solving with AI is another area that requires a lot of training, and learning about AI risks and how to control and mitigate them. It's another area that you can address with knowledge. The second area is how to rewire your company organization. So organization structure, testing new processes. Working with AI is a different way of operating, I was mentioning earlier. So, and these steps that I'm outlining, they go in that order. So first you need the knowledge, then you can start experimenting. Okay, now that we know, and we can decide which areas we want to tackle first, what organizational structure we need, how do we need to transform jobs and roles for new ways of operating. The third step is data. I think it's widely known that good AI works with good data. So if you want to develop internally AI tools, you need very good data to do that, and a huge amount of data. If you want to just use third-party tools, you still need good high-quality data, because in a way, any AI tool interfaces with data internally to an organization. So taking stock of your data, improving quality curation, increase or buy or generate data sources, sanitize data for privacy, confidentiality, access control. So these are all practices to start with. The fourth step would be risk management. So that's another area that usually, especially data scientists, like me, or machine learning engineers, they just love to play with the tools. They don't even think about what risks are out there. And you were mentioning earlier, you spoke with somebody about cybersecurity, AI versus AI. So there is a novel field which is AI security. AI is a very, very different software than traditional IT systems, and it requires a completely different way to think about how to secure it. So understanding really well AI risks, how AI poses new risks or amplifies existing risks, it's really important, and how to address it, and having good risk management in place for AI risks. And finally, the fifth.
You a question on the AI risk
please.
side of things, because it's one of the things that I think there's a lot of myths and misunderstanding about the security. And generally, when I'm suggesting to companies, if they're really wanting to mitigate their risks, and a lot of companies are not looking to build their own models at this stage. They want to use what's available. So when a platform like ChatGPT says that Teams or the enterprise version is ring-fenced and that your data is safe there, is that true? Because a lot of people are not, and there doesn't seem to be a black and white answer to that question.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you that question as someone who understands under the hood a lot more than the rest of us.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
Yeah, very good question. So I think the answer is always in the fine print. Terms and conditions are very untransparent, especially in the context of these new technologies and companies. Yes, there are paid versions, enterprise versions of tools like Claude and ChatGPT that promise the user data is not used for training. That's, let's say, the one-liner that everybody knows, because when they use these tools, it's also written down on the user interface. But it's really up to the legal team to really dissect and analyze the terms and conditions, because they might be surprised from other things, like perhaps certain data is not used to train a model, but that data still travels on an outside server. And it's really untransparent and unclear what happens in that, like when the data leaves the firewall of an organization, where it goes, how it is treated there, in which geographies the servers are. Because I also learned recently that there is this old debacle between AI and copyright laws at the moment. And it's very interesting. There are certain geographies, especially in Asia, Southeast Asia, where if you place a server there, you can scrape the whole internet, and no copyright law can just tell you anything. And so I hear sometimes news, Singapore is building data centers. There is a huge amount of investment going in cloud services. And if you go deep down the rabbit hole, you would find that, that's probably the reason why, because it's according to where the data is stored and trained, then you can do things that you might not disclose on the terms and conditions and privacy notice. So
is that any different to any other platform that we're using, though? Because so I think there's two things in what you've said. One is we're all using cloud-based software all the time, and I would venture to guess that most, particularly smaller to medium-sized businesses, would have no idea where their data is being stored.
Of course.
And so when people get really upset about AI and how their data is being used, I always ask the question, well, do you understand how your data is being used in other platforms? So I think it's raising questions that need to be asked, not just around the use of AI, but across whole IT strategies and approaches. And the other one is around, because I have heard people say that they've put data in and it has been extracted out from these models. But I'm yet to see any tangible evidence around that. Have you seen examples where people's data has actually been regurgitated, I guess, by AI in other places? When does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I think, and it ties really well probably with, let's say, the fifth step that I was suggesting in terms of practical adoption. So the fifth step was ethics and law. So there are laws, apply them, be lawful. And this is all about, keeping up to date with national and international AI regulatory requirements. In Australia, there are quite a few coming out that are really helpful. Audit AI systems against current law, and also more ethical frameworks like against worker rights. Making decision traceable, apply universal ethical frameworks. Those are all super helpful practices to be lawful and ethical. And when it comes to small businesses using AI tools, on one hand, it's true that for almost every technology we use, it's really difficult to trace where the data goes and how it is used. Let's think of email, for instance. Every email provider's data is uploaded on the cloud, etc. Now, the problem with AI is that the process isn't entirely transparent, because some data may be used to train AI model, even data from emails, and oftentimes small business owners use Google for Work, for instance. They get a notification from Google saying, hey, we're changing terms and conditions for using Gmail for work. Okay, fine, just click, don't think about it. And then I found out that Google's AI models are training on all my emails. And so on one hand, there is really, we really need to stop and think and understand what we are opting in or out. And on the other one, back to your question, is there any evidence of problems arising? So there is an emerging field that it actually started around 2006, but now is becoming famous and relevant, which is adversarial machine learning. And by checking a lot of research done in adversarial machine learning, that there are an incredible amount of examples of researchers that actually elicit information that looks like a copycat of the training data. That happens with images, a lot of image generations. If you tweak and treat the prompt for a while, I think you're going to be able to generate an exact copy of one of the training images. So that's definitely possible. And that's also why a lot of, initially when ChatGPT was released, companies like Samsung, Apple, they banned access because they didn't want people just to put trading secrets in the prompts, because it's not clear how all that data goes in, and definitely can be generated identically to the training data.
I think it's and the key to what you're saying is it's just not transparent. And I ask these questions a lot of people on this podcast, trying to find some kind of definitive answer. But I did have to chuckle this morning. I put, one of these silly viral prompts that does the rounds, asked ChatGPT to create a meme about humans that only AI would understand. And I got a picture back of a robot scratching its head and a pile of Humans for Dummies books next to it, or it was Understanding Humans for Dummies, which I thought was very funny. But what was really annoying was I had spent hours trying to create an image of a robot scratching its head, and I could not get it to scratch its head. And then when I asked for this silly meme, it had a robot scratching its head. So,
That's fantastic.
ChatGPT holds out on me a lot and then suddenly delivers the goods when I ask for something
Yeah.
completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun example. And back to transparency, I think it's still early days to have a definite answer.
Yeah, it is. And, it strikes me a lot that we're building the plane as we're flying it with AI. And a lot of people say, oh, we've had tech advancements in the past. This feels very different to me because it is accelerating. And I'm really interested in what your advice is to senior leadership or business owners who are trying to balance this. They don't want to miss out. They need to be, on the implementation integration train. They're getting all of these messages about how if they don't embrace AI, other competitors are going to, take over. How do you balance that really conscious, strategic, ethical, responsible implementation whilst also feeling this immense pressure to continue to innovate and accelerate in the use of AI?
That's that's a difficult question, and I think I think the answer is probably very long as well. And part of it, I think I already mentioned a few pointers in our previous conversation. But what I would like to add is that let's say which is back to some points that I wrote in my book. The AI ethical handbook nobody gives is really about 3 dimensions. If we think about the way, like what anthropological model or what conception we have of who is the human person, gives us a lot of consequences about how we then decide to use AI and deploy AI or implement AI. And one dimension is freedom. So the human person is a free being. And that has a lot to do with the concept of autonomy. There are many ways, business leaders, they just, again, back to the Woolworth example, okay, we use AI to cut costs, cool, shareholders happy. But that really hinders the autonomy of people and hinders one of the very basic human rights of people. And definitely that's not the right way to do it. The second dimension is relationality. Human people are relational beings. We want to connect with others, whereas many technologies are designed to disconnect us with others so that we only connect with the technology. Again, designing technology that helps the human person thrive, defends or fosters as well the relationship aspect of human persons. If we think about the one famous case of when that went wrong was the YouTube recommendation algorithm that created echo chambers and radicalized people over the left or right spectrum. That's where an algorithm only objective is to disconnect somebody from reality and connect just with the platform. Because if the platform only has to optimize attention or time spent on platform, that's what happens. So having the right objectives in place is really important to safeguard the relationship aspect. The third word or third dimension to safeguard is what I call transcendence. And this is not necessarily, let's say, some spiritual dimension. We can think of transcendence as this human drive to overcome limits. For example, if you think about professional athletes, and that there are many books I read about professional athletes, it's something that really inspires me. And this relentless pursuit of breaking the next limit and the next limit is something really that characterizes the human species. And what does that translate into is we want to go over limits, and anything that limits ourselves is sort of felt and lived like a chain and a constraint. As a society, for instance, we want to sort of escape the typical old-fashioned structure way of working, the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And there is a link with AI as an enabler for that. So an AI can really enable a future where we are no longer chained to the limits of time and output. We can work 3 hours a day and produce the same output as working 8. The trouble is, do organization foster that as a value or use it as a way to create even more social disparity? Like, okay, you can work 3 hours and I'll pay you for 3 hours, right? So it really comes with being ethical and pro-human person when a leader has to make decisions on how to deploy and develop AI.
It's one of the things I'm most excited about with AI is I think it has the potential to fix some things that are already really broken. And so paying people by the hour is not going to be a good measure of what people should be compensated moving forward.
Totally.
Because as you just said, if you can achieve the same amount in 8 hours, in 3 hours that you could in 8 using AI, then why should you be penalized for the fact that you are able to do that? So I think there's some of the really fascinating questions that we're going to have to keep asking. I had a conversation not that long ago with a group of lawyers who were saying, but hang on, if we use AI, we bill by the minute, not by the hour, by the minute. And if we're using AI and it shaves 7 minutes here and 15 minutes there, that's our bottom line that's affected. And my response was, well, maybe it's time to shake up that system and really look at, well, if you are saving time here, how can you actually use that to connect with your clients in a more human way and to actually produce a better result and a better outcome for them? But they weren't quite ready to hear that response.
Yeah.
And I think, that's this juggle that we're going to have to continue to do through the next few years in particular is balancing those two things. And I like that, there is no hard and fast black and white answer or solution.
Yeah, that's right.
But you've given us lots of really interesting, I guess, lenses to look at that through that I think will help people think through some of those challenges more. So, Alberto, as you stand on the hill and you kind of look out to the future, and I always say that hill is becoming smaller and smaller in terms of how far out we can see in terms of what's coming down the line. What's your insight, I guess, as to what you see coming with AI and how that might impact us personally, professionally, humanity, just the small questions to finish off.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. I think one trend that is going to occupy headlines for 2025 and probably a bit behind that is what is called agentic AI. And I would say, 2022 was the year of, all the GPTs, everybody launched language models. 2023 and 4 were more about, these models hallucinate, they have problems, how can we fix all of that? And so the late couple of years were more about RAG systems, so retrieve augmented generation. So how can we ground the knowledge of an LLM answer into facts and provide links with references, etc. And now that this is it's becoming one of the, most sought after implementations in enterprises and various businesses. The next one is going to be the next level of automation. So I can put more than one of these systems together just to plan out a series of actions and complete all these actions. This is agentic AI. And I think one crucial aspect to get that right is to decide what we want these new ways of automating tasks automate. And there is a philosopher that I read often, and he does amazing work with digital ethics, AI ethics, etc. This is Luciano Floridi from the Yale Center of Digital Technologies. And one thing that he often underlines is that artificial intelligence is in reality the process of decoupling agency and intelligence. So we have now new ways to have agency, so to do things that do not require intelligence. The whole debate of artificial general intelligence or AGI, I don't think it's really about can this machine achieve human intelligence. I think that there is no such definition. It's really, I think it's a lot of time wasted speaking about the debate. But in reality, what happens is what only human can do today that we can get machines to do. So regardless of intelligence of who knows what, we have a new tool to do a new thing. And but we have to intentionally decide what we allow these computers and machines to do, because that has a lot of, let's say, ethical consequences or ways to think about that. And so far, we have been just doing this subtly or without thinking too much about it. We let all our social life being eaten by social media, and we have seen the monsters created over the years, especially for teenagers. And we've seen that in various aspects of society, like approving a mortgage, or I was mentioning earlier, recruiting. All these systems, we kind of subtly accepted to give agency to these systems to run these tasks that are really crucial and have massive societal impact. I think we are at the point now where, again, with AI agents, we have agency on steroids. We can automate a huge amount of tasks, probably. But we really need to decide which ones. I think it's no longer enough to say it's possible, let's do it. We really need to stop and think, do we want to do it?
Yeah, and one of the interesting insights or mind-blowing experiences I had recently, and I have them a lot, where I look at things like, just when you think it can't blow your mind anymore, it does, was the shift that Claude, or that Anthropic made with Claude, which is actually installing it on your computer so that, and again, I'm not a technologist, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the whole autonomous agent side of things would happen through API, which is how we've strung these tasks together in the past. We can sticky tape things together, but they're talking to each other through a very controlled environment that each platform has control over how those actions integrate. When Claude or Anthropic announced that Claude can now sit on your computer and, in essence, access platforms on behalf of the user through the front door with not so much control through the API at the back end, that to me was it shifted my entire thinking about how these autonomous agents are going to operate. Am I correct in that assessment of the technology is actually shifting to be very much acting on our behalf?
Yeah.
With the agency that you're talking about, that's a whole different kettle of fish when you're thinking about ethics and responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is going to change a lot. The way you describe it is correct. And actually, it can work also thanks to APIs, because a lot of services are now already linked between them through APIs. It's enough to have an agentic model that can perform a plan and can be instructed properly to activate a series of actions and chain reactions. So it's definitely possible, and it definitely requires new ways of thinking. I come back to a concept I highlighted earlier. This new era, this new world really demands different ways to think how we operate. So it's going AI first means what is the new operating model? What is the new way we do things? And on the positive side, like I'm excited on one hand because if you're as much of a Marvel fan as I really love when Iron Man interacts with Friday, and it's. Everybody loves that. Like everybody would like to have such an assistant that you can just speak and get things done, etc. The real question is, well, there are many questions in terms of how do we do it properly? How do we do it in a controlled way? What measures and controls, and security is a big topic about that. AI without trust is worthless. So how do we do it in a transformative way? But that big, large question as a side, I think there is another one, which is what kind of society do we want to design? Like, are we okay to transition to a model where work is different, like is performed differently? It has to be rewarded, awarded.
Yeah, and it's the big question of our time, isn't it? Is, as society, what do we want this to look like? And not to end on a negative, but my fear is that the horse has bolted, and so how are we going to rein that back in and really make some conscious decisions and choices? And that's why I love speaking with people who are focused on the AI ethics and the responsible use of AI, because it's very easy for people to say, well, I can't control it, it's beyond my control. But I think we are society, and we do, as individuals, as businesses, have a responsibility in how we're using the technology, and hopefully in having some kind of say in how this is going to evolve for society, because it's fascinating times. I've been saying for a long time, I'm 50% thrilled and exhilarated at the potential, and 50% terrified about what could go wrong. And I've probably shifted now to maybe 60% thrilled and exhilarated, but there's still a very healthy dose of what could go wrong. And I get the goosebumps. I'm not always sure that they're good goosebumps. Sometimes they're not. But look, thank you so much, Alberto, for being with us today. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave people with? And please let people know how they can connect with you if they'd like to find out more about your work, and certainly about your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kate. It was a lovely conversation. I think on your comments of excitement and fear, I'm with you. I would say I started from 60-40, so I was 60% optimist, and with all the work that we are doing, and I'm also part of many conversations around AI safety around the world, etc. My optimism is increasing. I would say I'm leaning to 65-35 now.
I was hoping you weren't going to say it's gone the other way.
No. I think many people would disagree with me, but I'm more optimist. But I'm also realist, because even when I started, I was one of the early chatbot maker. My first startup was a chatbot maker in 2016. Everybody was crazy about chatbot, and then the hype went down, and then we realized that from the top frontier of technology to real life implementations, there is a huge gap that it takes years to fill. The same with AI, it's agents. Yeah, everything is developing really quickly, true, but between the latest frontier of technology and real world implementation, there is a long journey. It doesn't happen, the day after tomorrow. It takes some time. So that really is what makes me optimistic, and it takes time for people in society to organize. And there are many AI safety institutes sparring up around the world. So there is a lot of good work going into the direction of making this transition aligned with human values.
Yeah, we'll keep fighting the good fight, Alberto, because we're relying on you to keep you and other safety organisations around the world to keep this on track. So thank you so much for being with us today. Which is the best place for people to connect with you if they'd like to do that?
I would probably point to LinkedIn, so feel free to connect me with LinkedIn, search my name. There are not many people called like me, so that's easy to find me.
Wonderful. And we'll certainly include all of your links in the show notes so that people can find you easily too. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kate. It was lovely. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.